This podcast is brought to you by Stevie Wicks. Hand by Revival, Book 1 of the Unveiled book series.
The Final Frontier podcast. These are the voyages of Jake Boger and Justin Spur. Our weekly mission, to explore memories of Star Trek's strange new worlds, to recall the search for new life and new civilizations, to boldly go where no one has had the spare time to go before. Welcome, everyone, to this week's episode of The Final Frontier. As always, I am your host, Jake, joined by my first officer, Justin. We are your crew.
Howdy.
We are your crew of two. What is Howdy.
Howdy.
Yes, we are
Long
your
and
crew.
howdy.
We are your crew of two, and this week is the first episode I didn't particularly care for. I know. I was shocked, too.
I liked elements of it.
There are good elements. There are certainly good elements, but as a whole,
I was confused by the ending, but we'll get there.
oh,
I didn't quite
the
understand.
ending does not make any sense at all. But we are, of course, talking about Mudd's women.
My note on the Paramount Plus description, as always, is it's mostly based on the title this week, which is I thought based on the title it would have been I was thinking like that episode of Futurama where they go to the Amazon planet, like a mud planet that only had women on it. And then that's kind of what I was thinking it would be. I was very wrong. And then obviously the question is, what is the dark secret? And as it turns out, really dark secret.
It's not that dark, and it's not that much of a secret, though.
I mean, it is
kind of a secret.
For the 1960s, it kind of is, because I have to imagine there was an element of like, 1960s was very repressed, right? That was the whole thing with them? Or am I thinking the 50s?
You're thinking more 50s, at least, because it was about half and half by this time. Free love was a thing by now.
Yeah, fair point, yeah.
I will say, if that thing because I know the thing you're talking about, but you're going to have to watch if you haven't seen the episode. I know the thing you're talking about, and if that was the thing that existed, this would have been an advertisement.
I mean, yeah, true. Well, we're going to get to it.
Yes,
we
shall.
We don't want to jump the gun.
Alrighty, so this episode takes place during star dates 1329.8 to 1330.1. The show date is still in the year 2266. Original air date October 13th, 1966, 3 days before my birthday. But I wouldn't be born for another 21 years. So, wow, that seems like it should be longer, but it's not. Wow, I was only preceded by Star Trek for 21 years? That seems like...
I was preceded by Star Trek. Wait, what year was it?
1966.
I'm bad at math. Much longer. I was born in 1990.
Okay, so 24 years. Don't feel bad. I'm bad at math too.
I'm so bad at math, and to pull up my calculator, it's just so much effort.
I would not be the one you would ask if Captain Kirk turned to me and said, "How much longer do we have?" I'm like, "These are numbers." No.
I'd be like, how? Oh, what? Okay, I track by planet. So when we left Rigelian 9, it was 20 minutes ago. So it's been 30 years.
But what warp factor are we at again?
Right?
It's just confusing.
Dude, I hit the button and it goes whooshy. Okay?
See, the thing is, in the real universe of Star Trek, I would have been a red shirt, and I'm okay with it.
I probably would have been. I'm not on the deck. I can certainly say that.
I can pew with the best of them. Okay.
I can take a phaser to the chest if need be.
Only once though. Well, I don't know. Not if it's set to stun. Not if it's set to stun. True. Not if it's set to stun. If I could talk, but that's okay because we're setting our phasers to fun. This episode was written by Stephen Candle and directed by Harvey Hart. This episode, believe it or not, was actually in the running to be the pilot episode of Star Trek. This story. So I shouldn't say this episode
Interesting.
because there were a lot of rewrites done, but this concept was in the running.
Because I have a note here that's about her as she's not wearing red, she's wearing yellow, and I was like, so, does that mean was this earlier in production?
It had to
Because
have
of that.
been.
Yeah,
it had
because
to
I'm like
have
that's
been.
inconsistent with that earlier episode where obviously she's red, and in my brain, I know that she wears red. Like that's my image of her is wearing red.
Yeah. And see, here's
Not
the
gold. It was
interesting
very
part.
odd.
Yeah, because this made me think gold is actually the least logical color for her to be wearing, being the communications officer. Now, there's some debate as whether you would consider that science or operations. I agree with the red classification because at the end of the day, talking to people and radios and communication.
Yeah, she does the console, so she's operating something.
Yeah, but being a linguist, you could make the case that maybe a communications officer would be wearing blue. I wouldn't really fret,
Okay.
but gold command?
Yeah,
Nah.
and you only really see her the once, and like this feels like a maybe they couldn't find her costume on the day, or I sort of thought maybe there'd be a reason for it, but they're clearly not. It's just a random mistake.
There's one more episode where she's wearing gold, other than the pilot, obviously, because everybody was wearing,
Yeah.
yellow. And I think it's the Corbomite maneuver, which would make sense because this and that episode were really early in production, but weren't aired until later.
Interesting.
So
Okay.
that would make sense.
And I just have a lot of this episode. I wound up with a lot of questions about the inner working because once again, you mentioned season one's before Starfleet, right? Like this is really before Starfleet
No, it's not. It's not before Starfleet. It's just that they hadn't.
established it as a concept.
They hadn't established it as concept on the show or in the writers' room. I don't think so.
So in a
To
series of notes about questions about the inner workings of this universe, what is a registration beam?
I have no idea because I'm assuming that's like a digital license plate.
Okay. Okay. I guess I'll skip ahead because I had a lot. So is like are the Enterprise like space cops? Because they just kind of act like space cops a lot in this episode.
So whenever I think about Star Trek and the Enterprise and starships, I think about them more in the Navy. So if you're on a military vessel and you see an unidentified boat, generally speaking, you're going to ask them to identify themselves, particularly if they're in your country's waters, because you're going to check
Okay.
and see if they're legit. You're going to check and see if they're pirates, if they have weapons, this, that, and the other. One of the fastest ways you can do that is with registration because
Oh,
that's
okay.
set by the government. So that's whenever you're
Interesting.
thinking about a starship acting like a cop, think about it more like a naval vessel.
Okay. So is the like I'm guessing the concept of the registration beam. This is like a one time kind of only you hear about that, or is that a thing that comes back?
I don't recall it ever coming back, but it may very well because as we've seen, there's a lot of in these early episodes. There's a lot of one-off things. In fact, there's a very glaring one here. But to get people up to speed with where we're at, while the USS Enterprise is in pursuit of an unregistered cargo spaceship, it overloads its engines while escaping through an asteroid field. Kirk orders the Enterprise's shields extended around the other spacecraft to protect it until its occupants can be transported aboard. But this action severely strains the Enterprise's systems and destroys all but one of the lithium crystal circuits in the Enterprise's warp engines. Dun dun dun.
Dum dum dum. Great setup. I mean,
It actually
I
is. In the
all
beginning,
of
it's
my
a really good
notes
setup.
involve all of my notes involve the character that's coming. How much I love him and how amazing he is.
Well, the Enterprise manages to beam the cargo ship's 3 passengers and captain aboard, just as an asteroid impact destroys it. In the transporter room, the captain gives his name as Leo Walsh. The 3 women who accompany him are stunningly beautiful, and they distract the male crew members of the Enterprise, excluding Mr. Spock, whose Vulcan heritage makes him immune to female charms. The women are intended as wives for settlers on the planet. Is it Ophiuchus? Ophiuchus? Ophiuchus 3.
Yes. Yeah.
Ophiuchus?
That's where they were headed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now they're going in the opposite direction. Big
Uh,
complaint they have.
this is our first appearance of who would later be identified as Harry Mudd, but he does come back a couple times. So
So I have so many notes on this scene.
I have more notes than story.
Okay, starting with oh my god, the outfit. Like the outfit is glorious. The puffy shirt. My note is it pink? Is it orange? The belt, the hat, the mustache. And then I continued on because I wrote how much I love the accent. And then I almost forgot about the earring. So I doubled back and went, also, I almost forgot the earring. And just, I immediately love this character. And the boys are thirsty. Space is clearly lonely.
I literally wrote Bones has a boner.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they're thirsty. The boys be real thirsty. Space is lonely,
which makes no sense. Very lonely. It makes no sense though. There are female crew members on the Enterprise. It's not like it's a bunch of dudes.
Oh, that's true. It's not. It's right. Yeah, right. But maybe they're all paired off. Maybe there's no single ladies on the Enterprise. We don't know.
Uhura's single. Yeoman Rand is single. I think virtually everyone's single.
Oh, that is fair.
And with a career like Starfleet, you would assume that more people would be single than. I know there are characters that are married throughout Star Trek, but they're few and far between. Most people are single. Speaking of female crew members, did you see in the background as the women are walking through? I think it's the first scene where they're walking through a hallway. There's a female crew member that does a double take too, and I'm like, oh, it is the 23rd century.
Oh my! No, I totally missed that. Because I was so taken in by their outfits because one of them is wearing very thin sandals, and that made me question. So is the Enterprise like heated? Like because space is cold, right? You would think.
Oh yeah, well it would have to be heated. Yeah, it's part of their life support.
Interesting, because most of the people you ever see on in Star Trek, they always wear closed-toed shoes. So I'm like, she's wearing like really open-toed sandals. Like it must be like a comfortable temperature on the Enterprise.
I don't think that's a temperature thing. I think that's just a safety thing. Like having exposed feet in a starship would probably not be ideal. But then again, if you can heal major cuts with a spray bottle, who gives a shit?
So right? I took over the course of this episode several cracks at like what was going on. And so my first crack at guessing what was going on is they're hookers, right? And he's a pimp. It would explain the outfit. The outfit's very pimp-like.
Well, the outfit is just a Halloween costume from Walmart. Like it's.
But it is so. I mean, I'll get pirate. I will give you pirate. I'm just like it's so pimp-like.
Yeah, but I do think that Spirit Halloween here was, kind of a pimp. It's a broker of humans by any other name, you know.
Right? Oh yeah, and then they bring what's a master's license? I've never heard that before. That was another question.
I'm assuming that's a master's pilot license.
Oh, so it's like once again using the naval metaphor. That's what I figured. It was like a boating license.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So Spock in this episode, did you notice? It's the scene where Spock brings Mudd and the women to meet Kirk for the first time, and then as they leave, Spock literally, first of all, he's got this smirk like, "Hey, Captain, you're gonna want to see this." Like, but he's also having fun with it. But then when they leave, Spock literally has like tractor beam on her ass as she walks out the door.
Oh, I was just gonna say, it's funny that you say that Spock has his Vulcan because when they first show up, he's like, "Hello, the ladies." Like he was just as interested as the rest of them were. He was the first one I went. He's major thirsty.
Yeah, but so he's watching this girl's ass as they leave the room, and then he turns back to Kirk and just gives him like that little like shrug, like.
All right, yeah.
Once again, right. I'm not getting a lot of Vulcan here. I'm getting a lot of, but Sulu.
Spock be sexy, yo.
Yeah,
Spock be sexy.
Sulu is also immune though.
Yeah. No. I'm just saying, maybe look. You said we saw a little lady. Look, maybe Sulu's not interested. He's not interested.
And Sulu's definitely not interested because he's telling Don Knotts over there to calm down.
Right. Stop staring.
Did you notice that guy is like not a dead ringer, but I was just like, when I saw him, I was like, why are there so many hot women in space?
That's so funny. That's funny.
I'm just a plain looking fella. I can't compete.
Now that you pointed it out, I can't unsee it. But no, it did not occur to me. God, not.
I will say this much. The Ghost in Mr. Chicken was heavily underappreciated when I was young, but thankfully I watched it again as an adult, and I love that film.
He's one of those actors I only really know from like other people doing bad impressions of him. So like,
Don Knotts is hilarious.
That's like Rex Harrison is like that for me, where I just know Rex Harrison through bad impressions.
You should. Have you seen The Ghost of Mr. Chicken?
No.
You should. You'd enjoy it. It's quite funny, and not in like a oh this is so bad it's good and old it's good kind of way. No, it's actually a genuinely entertaining, funny,
No.
good
It's,
movie.
sometimes. Well, I mean, I'm the kind of person where I'm like, I can appreciate an old classic, like Charlie Chaplin films are true masterwork of like physical comedy.
No, that's why everybody emulated him.
Yeah, oh yeah. Well, his movies, there's like watching his movies where I mean, I had to watch like three of them in a row, and at that point they kind of sucked. But um, like a lot of stuff where like they don't got CGI in 1930s, right? So like when he's jumping in like ankle deep water head first, and he's not cracking his neck, you're like, that's fucking incredible. And like when I learned that they had escalators back then, it like blew my mind. That's why I love doing that series
They
because
had
like I learned so
escalators?
much. Yeah, there in one of his movies, he's like living in a mall, like in a little not convenience store, but like a department store. And there's one point where he's going up and down escalators.
Huh.
Yeah, yeah, blew my freaking mind. I was like, holy shit,
Well,
yeah.
what was funny is when we first started doing this series, I believe it was the pilot actually. I made a note. I was like, "Were automatic doors a thing?" Yet turns out they were, which is why it wasn't mentioned in the show. But
Yeah,
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 it was
yeah. It did
just
the same thing with escalators. I was like, what?
yeah.
Yeah, it
But
blew my mind.
I understand why Star Trek did it. It would have been just assumed that once you had automatic doors, they would become ubiquitous, and they did, especially in public places. Not so much,
Yeah.
homes and whatnot, but aboard a starship,
And
I could see that being a thing. Although it seems if an automatic door breaks to the bridge, for example, that seems like that
yeah,
would be a really really poor design.
I mean that's usually like a science fiction trope where the automatic door breaks, you can't get in, the scary thing's trying to get at you. It's very common.
Yeah,
But I mean, just from it's one of those like um devices where you're like you don't want to have your characters constantly having to open doors. How do you solve that? Automatic doors. It's really clever. I was thinking about I don't think I've mentioned this. I was thinking about that with the teleporter, where or the transport room. That's such a clever way to bypass never having to show a landing ship.
that's precisely what they did. And you notice shows like the
Yeah,
Orville make a point to be like, we have the budget for this now.
yeah. Yeah, and I'm like, yeah, it's such a clever way to be like, it's a cool science fiction thing that people can emulate or utilize, but also it saves the budget. Now, yeah, I kind of realized that because this episode really, I mean, the previous one did, so I guess with the evil Kirk, but this one really, there's a real protracted scene of like them like beaming up the guy that I was like, yeah, you know what? I like that. This is a cool idea, cool concept.
We also hear the phrase "pleasure planet" again.
I missed. That's so funny. That makes sense because they were giving me Pleasure Planet vibes. I didn't even. It's so
So
funny.
yeah, I
I
guess if
missed that.
if if we're keeping score, because he's flat out says one of them was on a pleasure planet, so I'm like, okay, she is at least an ex space stripper.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, they were giving me that. Yeah, not to jump. They were giving me that vibe, especially once what the nature of what they are is revealed. You're like, yeah, yeah. Now that you say that, that makes sense.
Also, fun fact: Susan Denberg, who played Magda, the short-haired blonde,
Oh yeah. Okay.
she appeared in this episode only 2 months after revealing herself as Miss August 1966 centerfold in Playboy magazine.
Interesting. That's another
So,
thing I've learned about watching stuff is like, and beauty standards have sure changed over the decades.
I mean, not that much. These women would still be considered attractive by today's standards. I mean,
I'm more
obviously.
meant. I'm more meant to a lot of the schlubby men that women were dating in the 80s. Where you're
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I watched me and Jordan, we did R-rated comedies. I watched Porky's and I'm like, these men are awful.
So I have to share this. I had an ex that was. Are you familiar with the show Dynasty? Not the new one, the original one from the 80s.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm familiar with it because I know that. Yeah,
Okay.
I knew that the new one was a remake.
Yeah, okay. So there's a character. I believe the character's name is Mark Jennings, the tennis pro, who's apparently the ex-husband of Crystal, the lead. Anyway, I saw this dude on screen for the first time because I was walking by and I'm like, who the fuck is that? Ron Jeremy looking.
Yeah.
She's like,
Oh
oh,
yeah.
that's Mark Jennings. And then I'm like, well, I see why she divorced him. And she was like, oh no, he was considered very attractive at the time. I'm like, that guy?
Yeah. I mean, the one that got me was I watched Annie Hall and I went,
Well,
I just don't believe that any of these women would find this man attractive. I just don't believe that. It's so unbelievable. It was the least believable thing in that movie.
you have to take anything Woody Allen puts on screen with a massive grain of salt.
That was that was another one I watched for
I've
video.
never been a Woody
Oh,
Allen fan because to me all his movies are just obviously his own personal pathologies.
yeah,
So
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
just like
It is.
I don't identify with this, therefore I don't enjoy it. But yeah, I was like, I mean, closing out the Dynasty book, John Forsythe, I get. Like
Yeah,
this dude, I don't get.
like our friend Virus Box, Patrick Swayze. I mean, Patrick Swayze. That man's an '80s
Okay,
icon.
okay,
You know.
I'm gonna out Virus. Virus actually loves Patrick Swayze. He was just trying to get a rise out of Haley.
I mean,
He said after he's like when we ended that podcast, he was like, "Are we live?" And I'm like, "No, we're done." He's like, "Okay, bro, I love Patrick Swayze."
I couldn't do it. That's fine. I'm about to make fun of Wicked on Saturday, so.
Oh, well, hang on. Are you gonna make fun of the play or the movie?
Well, the joke. So okay, since you're not gonna make it, the joke I'm gonna say is, and Jordan totally agrees with me, is the last trailer, the entire trailer, just defying gravity, and the one song that people know from Wicked is defying gravity. It's the one song that people. That's why it's in that trailer, because it's the only song that people know, and it's funny because that movie is, me and Haley briefly talked about. That movie's like 2 hours and like 40 minutes long, and the entire play musical is like 2 hour 25. So everyone's going to be waiting for Defying Gravity just for the movie to immediately end after
Well,
2 hours and 40 minutes.
well, Defying Gravity takes place close to the middle, but
Isn't it I thought that was the Act One closer.
no,
No.
no.
Oh, okay. Fair enough.
That
That's the Act One
I
closer.
think that's like the end of Act Two. Act Two or I can't
Oh,
remember if
really?
Wicked's a act. It's either Act Two or Three because I can't remember if Wicked's a four act or a five act structure. It might be Act Three, but it's basically like the middle climax.
Yeah, isn't that the one that closes out to I can't think of them too. So second half, isn't that the one that closes out
Yes,
to
yes, it
intermission?
closes
Yeah,
out to
yeah,
intermission. Yes.
yeah.
If you're making fun of the movie, that's fine.
I'm the thing is, I only know like three songs from that musical, and the only reason why I'm even familiar with it is because I used to watch Glee. And the episode, I like the Glee version of it, the Kurt's Glee version of it. That was one of
Ooh.
the first clips I ever saw of Glee, was him blowing the high note.
Oh
And I
yeah.
was like, what is this song? But yeah, so that's the only reason why I'm even familiar with it, like, at all.
Yeah,
Otherwise, it's not really my thing.
and we were just discussing the problem before we
Yeah.
went live. So I'm really and I remember why I saw it now. I had watched a Star Trek documentary where I was told in the documentary that Gene Roddenberry was against like overt sexuality and like interpersonal conflict. That is obviously BS because
Because he wrote the story for this episode.
he did, and so much so
Yeah.
that NBC program manager Jerry Stanley uh, is quoted as saying one of the problems we had was in trying to talk to Gene Roddenberry out of some of his sexual fantasies that would come to life in the scripts. Some of the scenes he would describe were totally unacceptable. William Shatner once noted, the fact that NBC allowed Bud's women to be produced at all is still a minor miracle.
I mean, it's weird by the end.
But we've seen the vast majority of the episodes thus far, you've categorized in some form as like this episode was sexy.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I mean, I don't think it. I would argue the maybe the previous episode was slightly more sexy. It was definitely living into a different kind of fantasy, I would say. So when you're like I thought we had dropped all pretenses of that. This is not an overtly sexual show, because it is a very sexual show.
Obviously, the pretense is BS. I don't know where they got. Somebody said they were quoting Gene, but like, clearly that's not the case.
Right. Well, I thought that's why I've been paying attention to who's been writing them, and I'm like, well, no, he did the story for this, so he contributed to this. So these are
Yeah,
his ideas.
yeah. So this is all, but then it also explains some other things that we've already discussed, and we will,
Yeah.
you know, yeah. Awkward pause aside. You know what is the best antidote for an awkward pause?
Ad break.
An ad break.
Halloween box opening. Spicy pumpkin. Witch's brew. Halloween themed pop-out wax tarts. Jack-o'-lantern spicy pumpkin candle. Dragon's blood. Happy Halloween.
And we're back, and the awkward pause is gone, and Kirk convenes a hearing, during which the computer contradicts Walsh's testimony, reporting that his ship's master's license, it is a ship master's license, so has been revoked, and forcing him to reveal his true name, Harcourt Fenton Mudd, a criminal with an extensive record. A criminal with an extensive record. The hearing ends as the final lithium crystal fails. I love how he actually introduces himself as Harry Mudd first, and I love the computer just like cutting him off at the knees, like incorrect.
So how does the computer just know he's lying? I don't. It's not like he's hooked up to anything. The computer could be lying.
So my best guess is that the computer can actually use like facial recognition software and search for records, because they do have a mugshot. Either that, or maybe
that makes sense.
Well, because Dr. McCoy has medical scanners where you only have to be, and one of them comes into play later. You only have to be within a certain proximity for it to work. So maybe the computer actually can act as a lie detector. It's the 23rd century. We're not supposed to think about it, but we're going to, because this is the final frontier, and that's why we're here. If you're not here for that, you can just watch the episode, which you should.
We're here to pick it apart. So yeah, so I did have a note about. So this is where they are. Are they space police? Because seems to be on trial.
They're not. They're not just space police. They're future police. Did you see that little tidbit?
No.
So I don't know if that's laziness or they're trying to put like an Easter egg in anything. But I'm like, is this Minority Report? Like, are we now at what do they call it in that movie? Pre-crime.
Pre-crime. Yeah.
Yeah, so because it literally says future police on his what'd you call that? His like dossier, his rap sheet.
See, it's funny because the last time they had when they were looking at the medical files, they went through them so fast. I paused it to read them. And this time I paused it to read it, and then the stupid computer just read it for me, and I was like, "Oh, I wasted my time trying to freeze frame this." It's annoying. So I don't know what. So it kind of seemed like, so they're just normal women. This was my another crack at guessing. I couldn't quite, but then I was like, okay, if they're just normal women, biologically they're just normal women. Like they're not like superpowered aliens or whatever.
They're not self-sucking monsters. They're not. Yeah, they're not. Yeah.
Something else is going on. And then obviously I once again have Harcourt Fenton Harry Mudd is a fun character.
It's good. So we're gonna science a bit here. So come on, we're gonna science a bit.
Okay, I'm ready.
So this is one of 2 episodes where the crystals that power the ship's engines are referred to as lithium crystals. All other times they are correctly referred to as dilithium crystals. Now I was gonna say, yeah.
I was gonna say that didn't sound right.
But then I asked myself, I said, okay, I know my Star Trek. And generally speaking, they might twist the science to make it work for the story, but they don't, generally speaking, they don't just make stuff up out of the blue. So I'm like, is dilithium actually a thing? Turns out it is. Dilithium is a strongly electrophilic diatomic molecule comprising 2 lithium atoms covalently bonded together.
What kind of bullshit do they say about a covalent bond in this school?
They say it's when 2 atoms share both their electrons, it helps them to stick together.
Li2 is known in the gas phase, so we've literally created it or seen it in its gas phase, not its crystal or solid phase.
So that explains why it's a lithium crystal at this point, because it's probably the first time we're seeing them. Yeah, that makes sense.
Maybe, but fun fact, I also looked, I was like, well, because I know lithium's a metal, but I'm like, is there a crystal form of lithium? Turns out there is. There is a lithium crystal structure. At normal pressure and temperature, lithium crystallizes into a cubic structure. There's a lithium-2 subunit that is a crystal structure. When lithium is squeezed, its structure changes, and it joins with its neighbor to form a lithium-2 subunit or a dilithium solid. This subunit has different properties than lithium.
Fuck you, science!
And I made a note here. I'm like, this is why Star Trek is better than Star Wars, because when you ask somebody to explain how a lightsaber works, they say, well, you see, it's a saber, but it's made out of light.
Actually, it's not to actually you, but there is an actual I mean, technically, it's a crystal that feeds light through the crystal. That's how a lightsaber works. And also, technically speaking, Star Wars is not technically, according to George Lucas, science fiction. He believes it's fantasy.
Sci-fi. Yeah, we've had this conversation on Toon Talk 2.0 before.
Yeah. Yeah.
That sounds,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, that sounds like a major future police cop out to me.
Hey, look, I thought that was interesting. But it was a really interesting documentary I learned that from. But yeah. So, you know, the Star Trek was always the real stuff, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. But then I started,
That's neat
go
that the
ahead.
science is real. I was just gonna say that's neat that the science is real.
At least the theoretical science,
Yeah. Theoretically.
Because, like, for example, matter and well, obviously matter is a thing. Antimatter is, at least hypothetically, and it might actually be, trust me, I'm not a physicist. I'm the last person you should ask about this, but it's at least theoretically possible. Or at least it might even be mathematically real, because a lot of times they'll figure stuff out mathematically before it's observed in the physical universe.
Yeah, I don't think they've ever actually discovered it, but I think it's mathematically or theoretically possible.
At the very least, yes.
Yeah.
But then I started thinking, so I think there are 6 lithium crystals, because they're lithium crystals now. Maybe they upgrade to dilithium later. I don't know. But as small as they are, because Spock is holding like the fried one, I don't know, it's about the size of like a softball.
Yeah, it's not.
It's not that big. But I'm like, you're telling me they don't have a storage room full of these things, given how small they are?
You would think, right? Like, yeah, it's just safety protocols I have questions about.
Well,
Their
so
backup safety protocols are odd.
yeah, so that was
These like real submarine rules.
yeah, but so my first thought might be, which again, the fact of the matter is they needed it for plot, but I'm overthinking it for your entertainment. Maybe these lithium crystals are unstable in a way, kind of like how
Yeah,
like
I
a
can see that.
piece of raw sodium is not unstable until it comes in contact with dihydrogen monoxide, water, and then you
Yeah.
got big problems.
Oh! Oh! Oh!
So maybe it can't come in contact. Well, okay, so here's the thing. Lithium, I'm going back to my chemistry, which I didn't do well in, but I remember lithium oxidizes extremely quickly.
Okay.
So,
I didn't take chemistry.
well,
Took
so
biology.
basically, so for example, lithium is a soft metal, so you can actually cut it with a knife with minimal effort. But as soon as you cut it, you see like the metallic sheen for a little while, and it almost immediately starts oxidizing. So maybe in its
Interesting.
crystal form, it has characteristics, even though it says it has characteristics unlike lithium as a metal, maybe it still is unstable when it's exposed to oxygen, so the storage might be
Maybe.
tricky.
Yeah,
I
I
don't
could
know.
see that.
I don't know.
I mean, anything that powers a spaceship, you would think would be highly explosive.
You would think, but then Spock's also holding one. Like I don't know. Maybe.
Maybe once it's burnt out, it's no longer highly explosive.
Yeah,
And
maybe.
they
In
just
fact,
put in what it needs to do the 5 years or however long mission.
yeah, maybe that's an oxidized crystal, so it's no longer,
Yeah.
maybe. I don't know. But anyway, they need lithium crystals. Without lithium crystals, the Enterprise must limp on reserve power to the planet Rigel 12 to obtain new crystals from the miners there. On their way to Rigel 12, one of the women goes to sickbay for some reason, even though earlier in the episode they talk about how they're worried that they're going to be forced to have medical examinations, and Harry's like, "Don't worry, they won't do it," you know.
So in the regards to Rigel 12, are there 11 other Rigels?
At least, because that's, to my knowledge, that's how. Yeah,
So what is the Rigel prefix come from then?
that would be the sun.
Oh,
So
so the sun is Rigel and every planet that's around it. And then I guess I have questions about the miners themselves. So it's just 3 dudes solo who mine an entire planet alone?
yeah, they imply that.
Yeah, that sounds like it sucks. Is it
That
like
sounds awful.
that's one of my notes. It literally just sounds awful. So is it like a prospector situation where they show up, can mine as much as they want, and fuck off?
Precisely. Yes.
Oh, okay. So because that really reminded me of I think it's a Charlie Chaplin movie actually, Gold Rush, where it's like Charlie Chaplin and this guy are like and they're slowly going mad. And, no, maybe I'm thinking of another movie. But basically they're trapped in like they've prospected all this gold and they're trapped in this little hut and they finally escape and a guy kills them and like disperses the gold dust and like it all disappears because they just think it's just worthless mud. And it turns out that like him going mad was for nothing. And that's kind of what this episode made me think of, was those three guys kind of seem to have gone a little loopy.
Yeah, you would. It seems like a real short-sighted operation down there.
Right?
But maybe the
It's,
whole deal is that, because I mean, this is the thing that happens, which I don't remember which episode it was, but we talked about, is capitalism gone in the 23rd century? This
yeah.
episode clearly demonstrates that it's not.
I was thinking literally the same thing.
Yeah, because you hit the nail on the head. It's a prospector situation. So these three guys probably raised funds, said we'll mine for X number of years, come back and we'll be filthy rich.
Yeah. Yeah.
So and
That
Kirk,
they're like, that's our big chance essentially.
yeah, well, and Kirk even says that he's authorized to pay, like a fair price, meaning there is money, and these guys are not directly subject to the Federation, meaning like
Yeah.
it's not a Federation operation. They're members of the Federation, but they're not members of Starfleet or, the governmental arm. So government got to
Yeah.
pay.
Yeah, exactly.
But anyway, so one of the women goes to sick bay for some reason and walks by Dr. McCoy's medical scanner. It goes off, and McCoy can't for the life of him figure out why.
And my favorite bit later is when he describes it as, she made my screen go whoop. And I'm like, that's a way to describe it.
So I noted the med scanner got a boner too.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I just love how Bones casually, yeah, I love how Bones casually asks her if she's wearing anything radioactive. And I'm like,
Yeah.
wait. Which I guess that answers the question of the guy wearing the less than secure radiation suit.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, maybe they just don't know it. I mean, it's the 1960s. Their idea of radiation was limited. It was not the same as us, I guess.
Well, I don't know about that. They lived through the atomic bombs and whatnot, but I
Yeah, I suppose that
guess
is true.
I guess that does point to, because if you can cure cancer with a pill, I suppose you could wear radioactive perfume. I mean, kind of
Although
a dick move, but
I suppose when you think about it from the 1960s perspective, like World War II and atomic radiation is so recent that in their brains they're like, well, of course, in the far future they've solved radiation. Why wouldn't
yeah,
they have? Like, it just makes
yeah.
sense as a idea that they would have in terms of seeing into the future.
I just love how McCoy's so casually like, "Are you wearing anything radioactive, my dear?" Which tells me, yes, they solved the problem with radiation, and yet
Yeah.
Spock dies from radiation poisoning in the end of the Wrath of Khan. Spoiler alert, but anyway. Did you notice, and I'm wondering if it was there before, did you notice McCoy's ring?
No, I definitely didn't know.
McCoy's wearing this ring, and I'd never noticed it before, and I'm kind of like, did DeForest Kelley just forget to take off his ring?
Maybe, yeah, it's possible. Or maybe what? Do you never see it again?
Not that I can recall, but now I'm going to look
Then
for it.
yeah. Now I'm gonna look for it. I'm guessing, yeah, he just forgot to take off his wedding ring.
Well, I don't think it was. I think it was on his pinky. I don't think it was his. And now I have to go back and look.
Like,
So when I
Forrest Kelly
edit,
wears a pinky ring. Ugh, I like him less
that's
now.
what I know. I felt the same way. I was like, "Oh, Bones, no."
Oh, he's that guy. Oh
Maybe,
no.
maybe he loses it in a patient, and that's why we never see it again.
I mean, oh, that's almost worse. Oh, Bones, what are you doing, man?
It's like the episode of Scrubs where Turk thinks he loses a pen in his patient.
Oh no.
Um, the other thing, when Bones and Kirk are talking, Bones basically says like, "Are they really that beautiful, Jim?" And I instantly went to the cheerleader effect from How I Met Your Mother. During this time, Harry Mudd acquires a communicator to strike a deal with the miners himself. It's also revealed that the secret of the women's beauty is the Venus drug. I just wrote down pretty pills.
I just put, oh, it's drugs. It's just space
It's
drugs.
always drugs. Space
It's
drugs.
always drugs.
We kind of have the Venus, we kind of have the Venus drug, except it works in reverse. Because I've known people, I don't partake personally, but I've known some people that have taken some fairly powerful edible gummies, and I bet you that could turn a 5 into a 10.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Yeah, it could, depending on the strength of it, it definitely could. There's certainly some pills you could take that will definitely do that.
Or Sorium brandy,
Yeah, exactly. It's just the correct amount of liquor, really. But I've got a note about the miners where it says, okay, the miners suck, but I get it.
Yeah, it's funny because your initial reaction to them is like, okay, fuck these guys, but then you're like, well,
I mean, I'm alone, I'm mining, I'm there with two other dudes, I'm having a bad time.
Like
You know,
clearly,
a lifeboat's a
yeah,
lifeboat. You know,
yeah, clearly this was a rougher existence than they imagined.
right, right.
But
They
they're
just all seem sad. Like
well, they're
this
probably
is
yeah,
my
they're probably under contract. It's probably like a 5-year contract. So you get to that planet
probably.
and they go to that planet and they're like, fuck.
This is it for the next 5 years. Also, I have a note. I didn't write what the actual line was, but one of the women has a line about like you should have a raffle and the loser gets me. That's not how raffles work.
Why don't you just run a raffle and the loser gets me?
It's just not how raffles work.
I mean, to be fair, she was being facetious, but yeah, that's God. I love the way I love where your mind goes. Sometimes you're just like, but that's not how raffles work.
That's not how raffles work. It's one of them would win her.
If if she had said draw straws, there wouldn't have been a problem. But
Right, exactly. The I'm just saying it's a weak analogy. It's what I'm saying.
yeah, yeah. Ben Childress, the chief miner, having been in contact with Mudd, demands his release along with the women in exchange for the crystals. The Enterprise. Well, okay, hang on. Before I go on the synopsis, that
Like
feels.
extortion.
Well, I mean, it's definitely extortion, but it also feels kind of illegal. I guess the fact that the women are there willingly, I don't know, it still feels
Yeah.
illegal. It still feels illegal.
The women's agency in this episode goes to weird places for me. They
Or
seem complicit,
it's
so
on
so the
vacation.
consent is there. Yeah, but to
The
be
cons-
fair, two of the women just kind of look. We're gonna get there. We're gonna get to what happened to two of the women at the end.
Right. The Enterprise's remaining power is insufficient to maintain the ship's orbit for more than a few days, so Kirk is forced to allow Mudd and the women to beam down to the planet. However, once there, Childress reneges on the deal.
So one note I did have is I don't think I don't think I've seen a nice planet on this show yet. They all seem to be varying degrees of desert.
I believe it or not, I think we actually have a nice planet coming up. I don't think it's in the next episode, but within the next couple. Well, there's one
Interesting.
episode that's called Shore Leave, and that is a nice planet.
Interesting. Because yeah, I'm like, it's all just been like outposts and like desert mining planets so far.
Yes, it starts out
Nice
as a
and
real
cheap sets.
it starts out as a real Stark show. You're not wrong. It's kind of like the beginning of Game of Thrones. It's like, who the fuck would live here?
Right? Like, it seems like a kind of like a bummer universe. I don't know.
Well, Childress may have reneged on his deal, but I'll tell you what, this sponsor will never renege on you.
The veil between her world and the other realm has faded, unleashing magic into the lives of ordinary citizens. Awakening from a 4-year coma, Tori James discovers a world transformed. For some, like Tori, the unveiling ignites hidden abilities. With her expertise in classical languages, she's drawn into a world of thieves and magic. Join Tori on her magical journey in Book 1 of the Unveiled book series, Revival. Unveil your destiny.
So, fun fact, Spock is holding another handheld device that is actually used in the real world. The device is a modern E6B flight computer used by pilots to aid in calculating fuel burn, wind correction, time en route, and other items. So once again, we have real world, old school applications, and I love that. Like I mentioned before,
Yeah.
there's several instances where, like, even today, someone will use a sextant, somebody will use like a star chart. I love
Hey, when
that
they
stuff.
work, they work.
That's what I'm saying. And it's like you said, people still use compasses.
Yeah. Yep.
At the end of the day, it's worthwhile. And you know, as many tools as we have to be able to start a fire now, it's still worthwhile to be able to make one from scratch.
Right? It's a worth because you never know when you need to.
At an impromptu party with the miners, it's a party with 6 people.
It's still a party as long as there's more than two people.
It's kind of a weird party. It's a very 60s party because they have zero qualms switching partners.
Right? I mean, they do. The guys are like, "Hey, man, I want the."
Eve becomes angry when they begin fighting over the other 2 women, which, okay, the synopsis is leaving out a very, very important detail here, which is not justified, but it's missing context. So Childress is trying to engage with Eve and hang out with Eve is the blonde with longer hair. And
Yeah.
I think she's the one wearing pink. He's trying, albeit in a very kind of shitty way, because they were essentially purchased like cattle. So
Yeah, yeah.
be that as it may, he's trying to at least engage. He's asked her if she wants to dance, blah 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 blah. But he very quickly goes, "Fine, fuck you," and
Yeah. I
goes
just
to
love
the
it. They
brunette.
just keep pushing the I want to dance with this one now.
Yeah, but anyway, Eve gets angry and runs out into a magnetic dust storm, which not smart. Well, with
Yeah.
Childress and Kirk in pursuit, Kirk beams back to the Enterprise to try to locate her from orbit. Childress finds Eve, brings her to his quarters, and falls asleep. Upon waking, he is confronted with a much plainer Eve, which is which
So
is which is something that would happen after being in a sandstorm, presumably
oh
for
yeah.
at least a little
Um
while.
yeah, oh, yeah, yeah. I mean, if it's I think it's a drug that wears off. Well, I thought it would.
I mean,
We'll
even if
get
there
there.
was no drug, I mean, you don't walk out of a sandstorm being like, ah.
Yeah.
You
True, you're
walk
gonna
out
have
of a
some dry skin.
you walk out of a sandstorm going,
So I've got a note once again about Harry Mudd, which is just that Harry Mudd is a real piece of shit. Is he the series' first actual villain?
hmm, that's a very good question
He's
because I mean
deliberately bad.
he's a villain, but he's kind of like he's a comedic villain. But yeah, you're right, he is actually a villain. So
Yeah.
yes, I think no, I would you consider Charlie a villain though?
No, because he's misunderstood. Like
He's
I think that
misunderstood. Yeah,
like I
that's
think
fair.
that he didn't know better. Like I think Harry Mudd is like deliberately victimizing people.
That's a very good point because up to this point, it's basically been man
He's a
versus
straight antagonist.
yeah, it's been man versus nature for the most part, and you could chalk Charlie
Exactly.
up to, Charlie would have been harmless had he not had, you know, powers.
Exactly. Exactly. Like that. To me, this is like very black and white. He's like the bad guy. He victimized these women. He scammed these minors. Although, did he scam the minors? I don't know.
Oh, it's very funny that you mentioned black and white. Well, in a Star Trek podcast, it's presumable, considering Harry Mudd doesn't particularly care where he drops the women off, I could presume that he's already been paid.
Yeah. But like,
Um,
okay, I have a lot of questions about the drugs. We're gonna get to the drugs.
we're gonna get to the drugs. Another fun fact, though, the circle cards that Eve is playing with, not only have we seen them before, believe it or not, because I've forgotten about them being in Star Trek. I used to have a deck of those,
Oh yeah.
and I will
Is it a
tell you
different?
what.
I was gonna say, is it a different game
No, no,
or
it's
is it
just
like
a
a
deck of
standard?
cards.
Oh, okay.
They're just circles. I will say this though, it makes absolutely no sense why they would exist in the future because they are impossible to play with. It's terrible.
Huh.
It's
Interesting.
not. I mean, you can play with them, but shuffling them is a pain in the ass. There's
Are they
no good way
different
to
from
do it.
like a standard bicycle style playing card?
No, they're just circles. They're a little bit bigger though, because to
Oh,
get
oh, they're
to
like
get the
literally just
circle.
circles. Oh yeah, that
Yeah,
would suck. Yeah, that would be bad. Yeah.
yeah, they're very difficult to deal with. So yeah, I don't know why. And see, here's the other thing. What? No, in Charlie X they were standard playing cards.
They were
So
standard playing cards, yeah.
I don't know.
Just playing
That's
solitaire with standard playing. Maybe I don't know. Maybe the standard playing card, or maybe the circle cards are like a gimmicky thing. Like these are fun, and this thing
oh,
just
clearly
standard playing cards are just cheaper. Maybe I don't know.
that feels like merchandise, kind of like 3D chess, because somebody was like, "Let's make a new version of chess so we can sell it," and they
Yeah, oh
did.
yeah, for sure. Well, I don't know. I don't know if they were merchandise forward in the '60s quite in the same way
Oh,
that they are
they
today.
for Star Trek, they absolutely were. In fact,
Fair enough.
there are some notorious early toys that were either never seen in the series, some were never seen in the series, some were just terribly made, and then some were just kind of weird. I think the infamous one is the what is it, the Spock clothes changing one? It's in the Big Bang Theory.
Oh, I don't remember.
I can't remember either, but oh yeah, Star Trek had a lot of merchandise, a lot of which didn't make that much sense, but
No, merchandise really does.
that the assault phaser, apparently that did very well as far as
I mean, it's a laser gun. Laser guns always sell well.
Kirk and Mudd beam back down to the planet to deal with Childress. The captain reveals that Mudd has been giving the women the Venus drug, and that the other two miners have already been married to Ruth and Magda.
So, okay, yeah, that was another. What is a subspace radio marriage?
I would imagine it would be very similar to like a CV radio marriage.
What is a CV radio marriage?
So that's, you know, like you just
married
get
over like a
married over CV
oh.
radio, yeah. So
So
breaker 19, breaker 19.
so were the women just gonna like take? Because that's it. Once you hear that, you never see the other two women again. It's never resolved what happened to them. So did they just did the other miners find out that they get? I mean, I don't think that they do because that's a note that I had is she does this big long speech after you find out that she's on the drugs, where she's like, I'm actually ugly without the drugs, and I was like, she's not though. She's quite an attractive woman. She's quite an attractive woman with or without drugs. So like I didn't understand the point of this episode. So like did they find out that the other two women stopped taking the magic beauty pills?
Well, actually, no, because I think it's implied that they will, because Kirk even says they can get out of it if they want to.
Okay. So like they can just keep taking the drugs if they want to or not, or they like the idea is like he just cuts them off from the drugs. So it's like, ha ha, here's the gang. They're actually ugly.
No, this is just a very, very strange way of the show saying like, no, beauty is on the inside.
That's okay. Okay, well, we're gonna get to that.
But in the most backward ass way possible.
Because that was I do have a question about the message of the episode, but I saved it for the end. But
it's a little to me it seems like I get what they were trying to do, but it just it's kind of like the message of a story, the moral of a story being like violence doesn't solve anything, but at the end of the episode the bully gets beaten up. You know,
I would have said it's like the message of violence doesn't answer anything after he stands on top of a pile of the corpses of his enemies. You know, like you just solved a lot of problem with violence.
You see, diplomacy shall prevail.
There's no reason we can't be civil. Is there?
None, sire.
Right. It's like it just sort of seems like you solved a lot of your problems with violence. It's the message is muddled, yeah. So when it comes to the pill itself, because he says that Kirk says when it's maybe we'll jump, but when you see her take it, like she just freebases it with no water, man. If she took that, it was like a big pill. It was like that big. So then I was like, wait, did she chew it, or it was like that she swallowed it all in one go? Because I'm like, that is impressive. That's impressive.
Maybe it's like a Flintstones vitamin. Maybe it dissolves.
Well, we're gonna come back to the question of what it's made of after we do the big reveal.
Sugar, spice, and everything nice.
Well, the pill she takes, the one that she takes from Kirk.
Oh, didn't he say it was gelatin?
Yeah, he said it was made of Jello. Yeah.
Yeah. So
that's why I was like, then maybe she did chew it.
Yeah. So Eve snatches a dose of what appears to be the Venus drug, but it is in fact a placebo. This restores her self-confidence to the point where Childress finds her as attractive as before. I'm sorry. I get the message, but I'm calling BS on this.
Well, but she's like she went from she's just got makeup on now. So did the makeup in her head? Like what? It didn't make any sense.
That's the point.
I was so confused.
Here's the thing, though. Over time, he actually could grow to find her more attractive because of her confidence, but it's like this,
right? And like it's just the message was it's so weird.
See,
like yeah, it was like so the lesson. What was the lesson? Was it just about self-belief? Like I was so confused.
No, see, here's my thing. I think they did a placebo effect to the placebo. In my head, they actually gave her the drug, but then told her it was a placebo so she would keep her confidence. That's the only way you can factually explain what happened on screen.
Because otherwise, it doesn't make any sense. Well, it's just just from the meta standpoint, I just couldn't understand what the lesson was. Where it was like at the end, where Kirk is like, "Yep, yeah, I did the right thing here." What was the right thing here? I don't understand. What happened here? The miners got married. I'm confused.
Yeah, again, this is another episode where the ending is kind of like, I don't know if this was the right play, Captain Kirk.
It's just like, is it a happy ending? Did we win here? Was this a win? This doesn't feel like it was a win. I don't know why. It just doesn't.
So anyway, Childress is happy. He gives Kirk the crystals. Kirk offers to take Eve away with him, but she opts to stay with Childress. Eve tells Kirk, this also makes zero sense. She tells Kirk, you've got someone up there called the Enterprise. The ship continues on its way with Mudd in custody. So first of all, there's only one scene where there's even a hint that Eve is into Kirk, and Kirk really doesn't give the vibe that he's into Eve. Again, much like Pike and Vina, Kirk's DTF, but I'm not getting the vibe that he's like falling in love at all. And yet there's this kind of like there's this idea that Eve knows she can't be with Kirk because he's married to the Enterprise, and it's like fair enough, but we never really saw that play out, so the line kind of falls flat.
Right? Well, what the one scene where it was like Kirk was very much like, "This is the line." Like it just didn't give me that vibe.
There's just this really weird moment where he's like, initially he's like, "What the hell are you doing in my quarters?" She's like, "I just needed somewhere to go. Everybody was staring at me," and then he smiles and goes, "It's okay."
My other thing was like, okay, again, my final note beyond the fact that this is a lesson about self belief. The other two girls, they didn't have that character arc in this episode,
Yeah,
so
not
like
one.
I just said the ladies just stay married to the miners. Like the two other ladies, they were clearly in on the grift. Like they were. I recently watched that movie Focus with Will Smith and Margot Robbie. Like they're the hot girl. Like they're part of the con. Like so Harry's just like, well, so these like new con. I guess he's arrested, but like they're just like, well, I guess the grift is over now. Like we're just gonna be married to these two marks. Like I just it was like, yeah, it was odd. It was an odd resolution.
My favorite line of the whole episode, well, it's a series of lines, but it made me laugh out loud because I forgot about it. When Kirk and Mudd are leaving, and Kirk turns to him and goes, "If it makes you feel any better, I'd be happy to show up as a character witness for your trial." And he just goes, "They'll throw away the key."
Yeah, I thought that was good.
That was
I was
great.
part of me was kind of hoping that, and I don't imagine he will, but I love Mudd to come back.
He does.
Like does he? Oh, excellent.
He
As
comes
in,
back.
like
He comes back twice, once in the original series, and then once again in the animated series. And
that's
apparently,
amazing.
I had read he's a recurring character in Strange New Worlds.
That's amazing. I quite enjoy him. He was very fun.
It's one of the most fun performances we've seen thus far.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think I said, was it last week I said it was my favorite guest character? I think this week he might be my favorite. I don't know.
He's
I
up
thoroughly
there.
enjoyed him.
I gotta say, once again, I got a problem with Spock. This entire episode, we got just smug, smarmy Spock again.
Yeah, he's picking fights.
With a distinct air of superiority through the whole thing.
Yep.
I'm not liking this. So clearly, a lot of this stuff just goes right over your head when you're younger because I
I
never
thought
noticed.
also I was gonna say with Spock, it also seems there's a lot of like figuring a character out early on. Like certain ones of these, they seem to pretty much like that. Yeah, like Bones and Kirk, they're like, we got this. But with Spock, they just doesn't seem like they knew what he wanted. Same with I would say that about Sulu and Scotty. They're not exact. Scotty in particular, they're like, well, he's on the bridge, but like, why? If he's engineering, surely he would spend most of his time below deck. It seemed odd to me that he was on the bridge.
You do seem there should be an engineering officer on the bridge. You do. There's very rare times you'll see Scotty on the bridge. He does tend to be in engineering, but obviously this is to get Jimmy doing more screen time because he's part of
Yeah,
the main cast. He's in the transporter room a lot, and for a chief engineer, that seems really odd to me.
yeah.
Because when you get to the next generation, Miles O'Brien is in the transporter room a lot, and he's not even a commissioned officer yet.
Oh, interesting.
So, I mean, he's a non-commissioned officer. I think he actually starts out as just a regular crewman. Eventually, he becomes a non-commissioned officer, but he's never actually Miles O'Brien never. I don't think he ever gets a commission.
Oh,
I don't think he ever does, even though he's. That's what I always liked about the character of O'Brien is the fact that he's not an officer, but he's in the inner circle, at least in Deep Space Nine. He's the chief engineer and still not a commissioned officer, which I would think, given that he's a combat veteran of
yeah.
multiple conflicts, you would think he would have gotten a battlefield commission at some point, although maybe he just didn't want to. I feel like they bring that up at one point, actually, and I think he says some. I could be wrong. It's been a minute. I think he does say something to the effect of like being an officer is too much trouble.
Oh,
So fair
interesting.
enough.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, it sure seems that way.
but once again, we also have another episode where they could have just taken them to Talos Fort.
Yeah, well, yeah. I just my thing was like
And then they wouldn't
a
need the
lot of like,
Venus drug.
yeah. My thing with this episode is there's a lot of like the Enterprise are yeah, again, they're cops. They're cops. They gotta be cops. I don't know. I didn't enjoy that so much. Yeah, Kirk being bad cop. Also, Kirk being on the down foot the whole time and just being like, I'll compromise morally for crystals. Sure.
Well, I mean, it's either you compromise morally for crystals or your ship burns up in a fiery disaster onto the planet. But
Yeah, true. But that I will be having said, I did enjoy the miners. I enjoyed their bad attitudes. I was like for being antagonists, they were really good. And enough cannot be said about Harry Mudd. Like just a truly great character. You're right. I did thoroughly enjoy this episode.
I knew you were gonna
He
have
was
fun with
great.
that. I didn't know if you would like it, but I knew you were gonna have fun with it. Um, and
Bad
again,
ending. My
bad
one
ending,
criticism. Bad ending.
bad ending, funny ending, but a bad ending.
Bad
Um,
ending. Yeah.
they're just, which again, I'll just put it because this kind of perfectly encompasses this episode. I get it. It was the '60s, but for some reason, after I watch this episode, I'm like, why do I want to watch Mad Men?
I've never seen Mad Men.
Oh, Mad Men's good. Mad Men's
I've
real
heard good
good.
things. Heard good things. But yeah, it was just
Mad Men is an enigma for me. It's a show that I should not like because it's very slow, like in a bad way. Well, I don't hold all comments till I'm finished with this. Mad Men is a show that I should not like because it's a very slow-paced show where honestly, from episode to episode, not a ton happens. It's a lot of conversation, and yet I'm fascinated with it. I started watching it and I'm like, I don't understand why. But I'm into this. I want to see more. And then there's a
interesting.
handful of episodes that are just incredible acting and just great story. But it shouldn't be as good as it is. But it's got a charm. It's definitely got a nostalgia, which makes no sense because I wasn't even alive in the '60s. I'm still trying to figure that out. But
Yeah.
if you were alive in the '60s, especially if you were like, you know, 20 to 30 in the '60s, this show is going to bring you back. Like,
Interesting. I mean, as I get older, and with this show, I've kind of discovered, like, yeah, I used to. My whole thing was, I don't understand how a show that takes place in space could be boring. That was my thesis going into this. And as I get older, I discover I prefer performance more than I prefer like in the early days of YouTube. There was a YouTuber I used to follow called Confused Matthew, who hated No Country for Old Men because quote nothing happened, or he hated 2001: A Space Odyssey because quote nothing happens in that movie. And like he's right, nothing happens in that movie, but it's I can be like there's no story and it was one of the most painfully boring movies I've ever seen in my life. But even I could be like, it's a technical marvel for the 1960s. So like,
yeah,
yeah,
just the thing about Mad Men again, and I get how they keep you engaged because you learn things about characters that the characters don't know, or
yeah,
certain characters don't know that character A knows, and this, that, and the other. Like honestly, the first episode ends with a startling revelation that in the last like 30 seconds changes completely the tone of what you had just seen for,
interesting,
45, 50 minutes with less than a minute of a revelation.
interesting.
So, and it does that a lot. It's shot beautifully, but at the same time, there's not a lot of really dynamic camera work. It's fairly static. Like it's not as static as Star Trek, but I mean,
Yeah,
there's a beauty in the simplicity, is what I'm getting at.
yeah,
It's basically the shots are basically there to showcase the performances. It's not really a lot of the camera's not as much of a part of the story as you would see in shows like The Walking Dead, as far as the camera movements and whatnot. But it's done deliberately and it's done very well.
yeah. Like, I mean, if you want to talk like character, I mean, I'm always going to be a Breaking Bad fan. Like that show was like 90% performance for me.
Yeah, yeah, most definitely. I would recommend you give Mad Men a shot.
It's on my list of shows I will eventually one day sit down and watch.
Yeah, it's very good. It's very good. John Hamm kills it. I
Yeah,
mean,
I've heard.
let's be real. Everybody kills it in Mad Men, but John Hamm is
Yeah,
exceptional.
I've heard exceptionally great things about it. Yeah, it's on my like very long list of shows I need to watch.
See, I think John Hamm could play Starfleet captain. I think that could be a thing.
Yeah, I always wanted to think.
I'm kind of
I always
surprised they didn't
confuse him
hire him
and
for Pike.
well, for it's funny you say that because we did an episode 2 talking about doppelgangers, but John Hamm and who plays Archer on Enterprise?
Scott
Scott
Bakula?
Bakula. I always thought that they were the
you
same
know
person.
what? It's funny. I almost scoffed at that, but then I thought about it. I'm like, yeah, you know what? If you dyed his hair black, I could see it.
But yeah, for the longest time, I thought they were the same person, and then I
And
realized they were different people.
don't get me wrong, because Scott Bakula did great. But honestly, John Hamm could have done that job.
Yeah, I mean, I like John Hamm.
Yeah,
He got a different kind of charisma. Like I really enjoyed
does.
him in Tag. I really quite like that movie.
I was shocked. I
I
love
quite
Tech.
really.
I just
Yeah,
love
it
the
was pretty
fact that
good.
it was based on a real group of friends. That's what did it for me.
When you read about the real story, yeah, it's nuts.
Yet again, our red shirt tally stands at 0.
It's funny you say that. Every time I talk about like slasher flicks or like the Terrifier movies, those movies are fun. It feels weird to say that.
Yeah, it's just it became. I'll be honest. I don't think it actually becomes a regularly occurring thing until season 2.
Sure doesn't seem that way. No, this
Yeah,
episode in fact there's no deaths. I don't think anyone died.
yeah, that's true. Nobody died. Nobody
It was a
died in
pretty
this
bloodless
episode.
episode. And it didn't end on a weird bummer. If anything, it ended with weird already they don't like each other domestic life.
Yeah, I did notice that. That
It
really
got
came
real like How I Met You, not How I Met Your Mother. It got real Married with Children real fast.
real fast, and I did kind of appreciate the bit where it was like they did a reversal on like the stereotypical like career woman today who the I don't need a man finger wagging, except this time it was the guy who's like, I don't need no wife, even though I negotiated a deal to get you down
Right?
here. But he's like, I cook my own food, and I'm just like, what do you want her for?
Yeah, right. What are we doing? I just would have looked at me like, what are we doing here?
Yeah, I mean, you don't want her to clean, you don't want her to cook, you don't want her to mess with your things.
It's like I'm an independent man. I've been
It's
a
like,
bet. He's like I'm an independent bachelor and I intend to live that way. You know you didn't like court this woman in a typical manner, right? You bought her, so your
yeah,
indignation is weird and unnecessary.
yeah. But it's not like she fell down into your life either. It was like you
Right?
negotiated a price for this
Right?
to happen.
You bought this woman. You really like your dislike of her is very strange.
Which again, I don't think it was technically illegal. It kind of feels mail order bridey, which again is not illegal, but
Mhm.
it's a
They
little dubious.
consented, technically speaking. They signed up for this,
That's what I'm
I
saying. They
guess.
signed up for it. So I'm not going to say it's illegal. Um, but again, it's one of those things where if he goes back to Earth, he's like, yes, this is my mail order space wife
Right?
who takes pretty pills,
She
but
came
not
from
anymore because she got her self
space Russia.
confidence. I
Yeah,
think only
I
one of
thought
them
that
was. I think only one of them was from space Russia. She was like from space Nebraska.
that's true. I thought the payoff was going to be that like she had taken the drug so much it had like absorbed into her skin and the effects were permanent now.
Maybe it is one of those kinds of drugs, or maybe she needs it more as time goes on.
You know what it kind of reminded me of? It reminded me of the limitless drug.
Yeah,
That movie, the lesson of that movie, I said it as I was walking out of it the first time, and my friends went, "Shut up." But the lesson of that movie is to do drugs, and then when the drugs start to mess you up, do more drugs to counter out those drugs and make the drugs awesome.
well, you basically just described the American medical system.
That is true. I did. You're not wrong.
Well, because I know a person who, and these are all prescribed by a medical doctor. He takes Adderall for his ADHD, but the Adderall makes it so that he can't sleep. So then he has to take Ambien to counteract the effects of the Adderall. And I'm just kind of like,
Seems redundant.
this seems like too many drugs.
Not
You
wrong. It
know,
does seem like too. One would say that is too many drugs.
this seems like too many drugs to counteract other drugs.
But I'm just saying, I would take the limitless drug. I would take it.
I take the Venus drug. The
I would
Venus
also take
drug
the
just
Venus
sounds like,
drug.
yeah, that just sounds like steroids.
I was gonna say it sounded like testosterone for men.
That's a
Can't,
better example. I was gonna say because I wouldn't take steroids, but
it reminded me of that episode where Haggy is drugging Hank with testosterone. That's what it reminded me of.
oh, but anyway, any final thoughts on Mudd's women?
No, what's the next episode? What's the name of the next episode? I enjoyed the bit last week where I tried to guess what it was about.
Oh, okay. I actually don't remember what this episode is about. I'd have to look it up, but Anyway, join us next week on The Final Frontier when we watch and take a look at the episode, What Are Little Girls Made Of?
Oh, no.
I don't think it's a bad one.
Okay, because that makes it sound like a bad one.
I know.
Who's the little girl in question? That'll probably be my first note.
I think it's an actual.
Who's
I think
the
it's
little
a
girl.
We shall see, but we will see you guys next week on The Final Frontier.
She was his fiance, and she's no longer his fiance. I didn't get the vibe that they were still together. Well, until they do a weird 1960s kiss later.
When Andrea kisses Kirk and then slaps him, Shatner looks into it. That's all I'm saying.
Way to show up 10 minutes late, Spock. Come on, man.